Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to help you decide whether you just snapped your shit up or not. And I know that this already sounds kind of silly because when you destroy your body usually you can tell. But actually most of the time when you think you got injured it's actually nothing. And I know that this fear that is constantly in the back of your head that is pressuring you to decide whether or not you should take a day off or actually take a break because you might be injured is something that weighs on lifters and that can be even more detrimental than injuries themselves. Because throughout your lifting career, there's going to be many times where you're going to think that you're injured, but you're really not. And taking a break is going to actively hurt you. So your very willingness to stay recovered and also promote your longevity is going to do the exact opposite. And it's something I suffered from, many of my friends suffered from, and therefore I've decided to create a guide that is going to give you a clear method to decide whether or not you are actually injured and to just clear any doubts, because sometimes just trusting your body and the way your body feels doesn't cut it. So before we start, I actually already made 2 videos about the very topic of injuries. If you're interested, I'm putting them in a pinned comment because I discussed where injuries occur and when they occur. So I discussed form and I discussed load management and fatigue. That is not going to be covered in this episode. So if you want to listen to these topics first, listen to these videos. Because today, as an introduction, I'm going to discuss the how. How do injuries occur in the first place? It's a very interesting topic because if you think about it, it reveals a lot of aspects of bodybuilding and of lifting in general. So essentially what happens when you get snapped up, when you visit Snap City is this. You exerted pressure that was distributed throughout the muscle that exceeded the body's ability to handle the load, which led to something breaking. And that something can be muscle, it can be tendon, it can be bone, it can be cartilage, etc., etc. A lot of things can go wrong when you lift. And that is also the anxiety associated with lifting and the very idea of it potentially being dangerous because, yes, you can hurt yourself severely when lifting. But let's go back to this very notion of injury. It is therefore caused by an excess of pressure. And that also shows to you that pressure in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's the excess that is a bad thing. Because in reality, if pressure did not exist, then muscle building would be an impossibility. You impose pressure on the muscles and you actively injure the muscle fiber. This is bodybuilding. Every single time you lift, you create damage to the tissue. And it is that damage that repairs itself. So in reality, bodybuilding is a sort of controlled destruction. It is building in chaos because without the ability to break down the muscle fibers, you would be left incapable of growing, which is interesting if you think about it, right? Because let's say you try to make someone invincible, you would have to make their muscle fibers indestructible. But by the same token, you would curse that person because they would never be able to grow their muscles ever again. And so that process of building muscle has to exist through their destruction. But it also means that you can always overplay your hand, overdo it, and get injured. And when you get injured, something snaps. But let's think about it in more details. When something snaps, usually what is the thing that gives? When you listen and when you look around you and you ask people, I have personally found that it is very rarely the muscle that gives, meaning that muscle belly tears are fairly rare. Most of the time, it's some sort of tendonitis or it's a tendon that is sprained or gives. And it's interesting and a little bit concerning too because if you look at the nature of tissue throughout the body, muscle and the muscle breakdown of sorts is the least dangerous type of injuries. Why? Because muscle recovers. You can tear your muscle all you want, it's going to recover. It can take time, it can be painful, it can necessitate rehab, but it will eventually mend itself. And that is not the case for everything. There are certain parts of the body, like the tendons, for example, that if they snap, that's it. The only way for you to get your actual integrity back is surgery. Without that, the tendon will stay separated for the rest of your life. which also shows that in lifting, your number one priority is always going to be to target the muscle for two reasons. One, for the growth aspect, but also for the safety aspect. And that puts the entire idea of training the tendon to the side. It's an idea that for me, for muscle building, is obsolete. It can be good for strength athletes or athletes in general, but for us, when you train the muscle, you train the tendon. And since an injury that is going to snap the tendon is the one we want to avoid at all costs, you're always going to prioritize the form that puts the most pressure on the muscle because they're extremely resilient. And if you listen to that very wisdom, I believe that your injuries are going to be much less frequent, and if they happen and occur, they're going to be much less severe. So this is an important topic to start with because I want you to think about two variables when it comes to injury. I want you to think about pressure, what I just described, and fatigue. Fatigue is a result of pressure, and it's something we seek. You put pressure on the muscle, you damage it, and it's now fatigued. It recovers, and you put pressure on it again. And these two variables, just like with many things in lifting, actually communicate with one another. They cannot exist with one another, and they have an influence on their brethren, because pressure is going to create fatigue, yes, but fatigue can also boost and multiply pressure. What I mean by this is that, for example, if you squat 50% of your max on day one, that is nothing, it's baby weight. You will never get injured with that with proper form. But if you were to repeat that experiment and you upped the intensity to maybe 80% and you squatted every single day to failure every single day, the risk of injury would increase with every day. Why? Because the fatigue increases. So even though the pressure is still stable, like, let's say you do 5 reps at 80% every single day, pressure does this. And yet injury risk does this. Why? Because the fatigue aspect is going up. So the more fatigued the muscle is, the less pressure you need to exert to actually snap it. And that goes for the entire body. So these two variables need to be taken into account when we discuss the how. How do we visit snap city? That's very simple. It's a simple equation. Fatigue plus pressure. We want these variables to be applied again to grow the muscle, but we want them to always be in control, because if we lose control, we're going to get injured, and it's something that we do not want. And I find very important to mention that and to introduce the idea that metrics are what create injuries, because I have seen a rise in a certain type of fatalist discussion on YouTube Fitness where people want to invoke the idea that injuries just happen. Like, you get injured, okay, it just happens, and it's something that apparently for some people is unavoidable. And that to me is a terrible mindset to put into people's head, because it presents injuries as something that just falls from the sky. Like it's the gods that decided that today you get injured. And to me that is complete nonsense, and on top of that, it's lazy thinking because it removes your responsibility. But by doing that, it also removes your ability to control injuries. I can guarantee you that this mindset gets people injured because they just go into it and they say, pop, it's a prayer to the Lord and whatever happens, happens. Well, no. Injuries can be controlled with fatigue and pressure. If you control those metrics, you control the potential happening of injuries. Of course, it's not foolproof, but I can tell you that from my experience, I have not been injured for the past 2 years and a half, not even a slight injury, because I am in total control of all of the variables of my training, and therefore I don't get injured. It's as simple as that. Because again, injuries don't just happen. You're not going to do a warm-up on squat one day, go down and snap your back. It is not possible. But you will see that even though that's not possible, there are still, in a sense, possibilities of mitigating freak accidents if they were to occur. And I'm going to explain that to you. So that is for the entire discussion around the how when it comes to injury. If we are in control of injuries and their severity, which is very important, well, it's not just that we can avoid injuries in total, it's that we can even make sure that if they do occur by some lack of luck or whatever you want to call it, fate, they're not going to be severe enough to take us out of the game. Because that's the big plan, by the way. It's to make sure that we never get injured enough that we cannot keep lifting. We want something that is going to take us out for a day or two and then come back. That is the dream, and that is 100% doable. If you look at metrics, so metrics are going to be what I consider the hard facts and numbers, and if you look also at pain, and pain is the second big thing we're going to discuss in this video, because pain is essentially what most people focus on when it comes to injuries, and it's the least important variable, at least in terms of metrics, because you cannot quantify pain. Trying to quantify pain and relate it to a severity or a certain degree of degradation of the body is a terrible idea. And I'm going to explain to you why. Because now we're going to get into the fascinating topic of the psychology of pain, a topic that has been mentioned on YouTube Fitness and that is starting to make the rounds, which is excellent because it is very important for you as a lifter to develop and to think about a ton. As in my opinion, and in the opinion of many people, pain is a messenger that is not always truthful. What it means is this. Your brain sends signals to the body, but the body also sends signals to the brain. And pain is essentially a way for the body to preserve itself. So in the grand game of messages, pain is the one that shows itself with a red flag. It's a way for your body to warn you. And by body I also mean your brain, because in reality, you are not your body. You are the pilot of a vessel. And some people think that they're their brains. I don't even necessarily agree with that. You're your consciousness that inhabits the brain that also pilots the body. So pain in reality is not a signal to the body, it's a signal to your consciousness. It's a signal that is trying to tell you, hey, something is going on, something that essentially looks to be wrong, and we, the console of the brain and the body, would appreciate if you, as the landlord and owner, would please take a look at it. Please see if this is serious or not. A lot of people don't think like this. For them, pain is an order. It's an absolute signal that says something is wrong, and that is not true. Your brain will constantly bombard you with pain because your brain and your body are essentially wimps and cowards. The one thing they want in life is to survive and pass on their genes. Survival is the most absolute thing that they must do. And they will do whatever they can to make sure that you, the knucklehead that you are, is surviving and is preserving his or her body. So guess what? They are going to send pain signals left and right for absolutely nothing. Things sometimes that mean, again, nothing. So this is the first thing I want to introduce. The idea that pain is absolute and always correct is wrong. Most of the time, it is completely false. And in the grand scheme of the psychology of pain, we have many experiments and proofs that show that what I'm saying is correct. For example, there's a study that I particularly like because it was introduced to me by a psychology teacher who was grinning the entire time he was telling the story. And essentially, the experiment was this. They put people in a chair and they blindfolded them. And they told them, okay, we're going to test your resistance to pain. And we're going to shock you. We're going to send electric shocks throughout your body, and you're going to have to grade the intensity of the pain from 1 to 10. And so they did. They selected 50 people and they did that. And guess what they found? Regardless of whether or not they administered the shock, the person still felt pain. Meaning that they would still grade the shock as painful even if there was no shock. Because their brain was anticipating a shock that was translated as a potential risk to the integrity of the body, and it was therefore carried over towards the landlord, you, the owner of the person that was blindfolded, as pain. And experiments like this exist across the board of people who are told, hey, this is gonna hurt, and when you prick them or you do something that is not supposed to hurt that much, it hurts plenty. That is known as a nocebo. It's when you essentially psych yourself out. A placebo, you psych yourself in, and you get benefits from something that it shouldn't have had the ability to provide such benefits. A nocebo is the exact opposite. And guess what? Pain is the number one signal that is going to occur because of a nocebo. Because you can literally tell yourself that you're in pain and the pain will occur. I know that for some people it sounds loony and it sounds crazy, but it is true. And you will find that a lot of the time when you get injured, that's what's happening. You have intellectualized the concept of you getting injured that is fed by all of the videos you've seen of people getting snapped up, all of the horror stories you've heard of people destroying their body, and therefore you're in deep fear. Fear feeds the pain signal and you feel pain. And guess what? After the pain, you tell yourself, oh, I am injured. This is called the Pygmalion effect. It's a self-defeating prophecy that leads you to eventually stop training. So it's something we want to avoid at all costs. We want to avoid false alarms as well. False alarms are sort of related to nocebos, but I have a very good example of what a false alarm could constitute. Do a squat or do a deadlift, and then do a dead hang. And let your body fully hang. And when you do the dead hang, I want you to slowly relax the muscles of the core and the glutes, something that you usually don't do. When you do a dead hang, you will notice that you just automatically brace. Everything is braced. Why? You try to maintain your hips and your lower body stable. When you relax those muscles consciously, your lower back is going to have to stretch to support the weight that is not supported by your glutes and your abs. And when you do that, you will find that a very strange sensation starts to spread throughout your body. You're going to start to feel pain. And not just any level of pain, serious lower back pain, the type of back pain that a lot of people would actually interpret as a potential severe lower back injury. They would say, wow, I just slipped a disc. And yet, nothing has happened. You're just hanging from a bar. So why are you in such pain? Well, for one simple reason. Your lower back is not used to having to support your lower body like this because you're always walking around. Your lower back always serves as a stabilizer. It never has to actually hold the lower body from falling, so it just freaks out. Your traps have that function. When you grab something, it stretches the traps. They don't freak out. That's what they were meant to do, not your lower back. So the lower back thinks, okay, something is going on. This looks like a potential injury in the making. I'm going to be sending plenty of pain your way so that you just stop. And you will find that if it becomes excruciating and you stop and you start walking, after a few steps, the pain will be gone. But guess what? If you do the same exact experiment without hearing my story first and explaining to you why you would feel pain, that pain could remain there for 2 weeks. Why? Because you're going to tell yourself, wow, I just got injured. And guess what feeds pain more than anything, even more than walking on an injury? Your brain. The more you think about pain, the more it grows. Because if you have the ability to create pain from nowhere, you also have the ability to feed pain. A lot of the time, people who get lower back injuries are not really that injured. It's just a little bit of pain. But then they over-focus and they obsess on that because of all of the I shattered my spine memes, and they do nothing, they don't train anymore. And so the injury just degrades and the pain gets bigger and bigger, and they think, oh, wow, I actually did get injured. No, you did not, but you did talk yourself into feeling more pain. And that is something you want to avoid. I actually want you to embrace that mindset. And I know that for some, this is going to lead to an extremist reaction. I'm going to tell you that, and you're going to feel, wow, pain truly is the worst, and my body is a liar, so I'm going to just ignore it. This is not what I'm saying. I'm saying to not unorganically create pain responses. I'm not saying to ignore pain, because also there has been now a large number of people and a new movement of what I can only call pseudoscience and pseudopsychology who take nocebos and run with it, and have decided that since you can engineer pain into your brain, then it means that all pain is bullshit. And I've read people trying to create papers based on that assumption that say things like, oh, well, since pain is in your brain, then it's just part of your imagination, so it's not real. The issue with that mindset is that if you apply that to everything in life, nothing is real, and everything is just the fruit of your imagination, because everything is filtered through your brain and then fed to your consciousness. So things like love, like friendship, like hunger, like happiness, all of that are also factors and fabrications of your brain. You cannot think like that. In a sense, it's a very reductionist and nihilistic view of the world, and it's dangerous because you're going to stop trying to understand what is going on. Pain is not an illusion. It's a trick. The two are different. An illusion you can't understand. A trick you can try and find the strings that pull underneath the table to understand the entire affair. And that's how I want you to approach pain. It's not illusionary, it's not a fabrication again, it is very real, but the signal and the message it tells you is what we need to focus on. We need to look at it and decide whether or not this message is correct or a simple lie. That is our job as the owner of a body. Because pain is, as I said, a signal, but it doesn't always signal damage. It's that distinction that you need to make. Pain exists on one side and damage exists on the other. They're not always crossing. And again, I have a proof for that. If you did something very unpleasant, such as taking a screw or whatever type of pincer, and you removed one of your nails, like a healthy nail right off your hand, it would be one of the most painful things you've ever experienced in your life. And not only would it be painful at the moment, it would be very painful in the long run. The question I have for you is this: is your body damaged? Is your ability to actually move the body and the integrity of the body damaged? The answer is no. It's just that this particular area of the body has a lot of nerve endings and therefore it hurts a lot. But the amount of pain you felt has no correlation with the actual damage done to the body. And you could even deadlift, squat, bench with a removed nail. It would still be very uncomfortable, but you wouldn't lose any strength because pain has no ability to be directly correlated with anything severe. It sometimes is, but most of the time it isn't. And another proof of that is also your tendons. Have you ever bumped your elbow on the table? Do you know how much that hurts? You know exactly what I'm talking about. This doesn't mean that the tendon is damaged. It doesn't mean that you can't use it. It just means that you bumped a portion of the body that your brain thinks is protected, because tendons tend to be surrounded by muscles and bones, and therefore your body freaks out. It's thinking to itself, okay, what is going on? You just clearly got into an altercation with something or someone that attacked a tendon that is a vital organ. I'm going to send you a lot of pain so that it doesn't happen again, because if you damage that tendon, it's not repairing itself, so be careful. You ever ask yourself why punching your shoulder or your pec or your muscles doesn't hurt that much? It's because there's not much nerve endings in muscles. Why? Because the body knows perfectly that muscles have a lot of recuperation capabilities. So it's not too worried about damage to the muscle. It's very worried about damage to the tendon. But across the board, that same experiment can be done again and again. You can have a very severe bruise on, I don't know, your upper back, doesn't stop you from squatting, the bruise is still gonna hurt. So all of this to say that pain is not an absolute signal. You need to remove yourself from the pain and from the emotion attached to pain and think about it with your brain. That is important because if you don't do that, the method and the guide I'm going to unveil right now is completely useless. So, now that I've said that, topics that I find personally very interesting, let's get into the actual meat of the video. I promised you a guide to decide whether or not you just visited Snap City and you snapped your shit up. And I have one right there. I've devised it via levels, meaning that the higher the level, the higher the severity of the injury, none of which is going to be correlated with pain, at least not the physical sensation, but rather the intellectual interpretation that is going to happen via criteria that I'm going to expose right now. So the first grille de lecture I'm going to offer for you guys is occurrence, meaning that I'm going to give you a way to interpret the way the body feels when the injury, potential injury, occurs at the T moment where it's supposed to have happened. Level 0 is noise. You heard something, you were doing a movement or whatever, and you heard something. It's level 0, meaning that it means absolutely nothing. Don't worry about that. I know a lot of people who say, oh, I heard a pop when I deadlifted. I heard my knees crack when I squatted. If it's only noise, it means nothing. Free your mind from it and just move on. Level 1 is pain. You did a movement, and during the movement at some point you felt pain. Level 1, meaning that it also means nothing. You did not get injured, okay? Sometimes, as I said, you do something weird. You get into a position where the body does not like it, and it just sends pain. Because keep in mind that pain is one of the few unlimited resources that the body has. For the rest, it's very greedy. It doesn't want to waste it. Calories, water, all of that, it's really good at making sure that it's not just spreading it around for no reason. But pain, it'll send pain your way. Like it's none of your business, because it doesn't care if you feel pain. It wants you to survive. So you did something strange, there was pain, means nothing. Don't freak out. What I recommend is this. It's one of two things. Either you continue the set and you do one more rep. If the pain is still there, you stop. After you stop, you take 2 minutes, you walk around. You do not focus on the pain. Let me insist on that. As I said previously, you can feed the pain signal by thinking about it. I want you to take your mind out of the body part that you think is injured and just think about something else, okay? Walk around, return to the bar, to the dumbbell, to whatever, and do another set. 99% of the time, the pain is gone. Why? Because the pain was a fabrication. If the pain is not gone, this is when you might have to consider that, yes, there could be a slight injury. And that's what leads us to level 2, consistent pain. The pain subsists throughout the workout, meaning that it doesn't go away. This can still be absolutely nothing. It can be a small strain. It can also be, again, a nocebo because you panicked. It can be a very small bruise. Sometimes you squat, you have a blood vessel that pops in your leg. It hurts for the rest of the squat day. You didn't injure a muscle or a bone or a tendon. It's just a stupid blood vessel. You can power through it if you want, or you can just go home. If you want to be more conservative, you can just go home. When you come back for another session, the pain is just going to be done and completely gone from your body. Level 3, perceived structural damage. Okay, so this is the moment where you go down and you feel something. And I know that you know what I'm talking about. It's not a noise. It's a physical sensation where you feel that something has shifted. Sometimes it's a tendon where you can visualize that it did something weird. It moved out of its axis. Something happened. But still, at this point, this means nothing, meaning that it's a perceived structural damage. It's not an actual structural damage. So what you're going to do is the same as level 2. You're going to take another set. Is that noise still happening? Is that physical sensation still there? If it's not, you're good. And most likely, it's since it was not accompanied with pain, it was nothing. Level 4, perceived structural damage plus pain. This is when we get into the realm of potential injuries. Yes, if you felt a shift, if you felt a crunch and there was pain, it could be severe. That being said, it could also be your brain. Keep in mind that your brain thinks faster than you do in a sense, meaning that it could be that you heard the noise and a nanosecond afterward, your brain freaked out and thought, what was that noise? I'm going to make you feel some pain just in case that was something serious. This is very possible because, again, keep in mind that pain doesn't equal damage. The body is sometimes completely clueless to what is happening in its own core. So this is level 4. For level 4, I would recommend to just walk around. Walk around, see if the noise that you heard actually created some destruction of integrity, if the pain is still there. If the pain is still there, you might have actually become injured because now the number of coincidences at the same time are a little bit too severe. Again, keep in mind, this is not a guide to make you power through severe injuries. It's a guide to help you decide if you got injured. Level 4 is the level where you're very likely injured. Level 5 is perceived structural damage, pain, and noise. This is the realm where I personally believe that that's an injury. You heard a snap, you felt a snap, and you felt pain at the same time. Yeah, it's an injury. Doesn't mean that it's completely severe or the end of the world, but it's potentially an injury. And that leads also to level 6, a complete destruction of integrity, meaning that you felt the lift or you fell. Like you got a certain degree of injury during a movement and it just completely robbed you of your ability to move. Yeah, you don't need this guide to know that you're just injured. These are freak accidents that are extremely rare. And let me tell you this, if you manage your loads, you manage your fatigue and the pressure, this will never happen to you. Impossible. It's impossible. The only time it does is for people who take a risk. They flip a coin and that coin landed on the wrong surface and you're fucked. But I can tell you that this is 100% avoidable. You can go your entire lifting career and never have that type of accident. So that was for the occurrence. That's the systemic guide that I devised for you. And I want you to think about something before we move to the next grade and the next grille de lecture. If you think about pain as something that you can feed with your mind, it also means that the only way to avoid that psychosomatic summoning of pain is to be in control of the mind. And for that, the best way I have found, again, is to separate in your mind pain and damage and just see pain as something on the side, because I can tell you from experience that you can, from something innocuous, develop severe amounts of pain. And again, the proof is in many experiments. One that I read recently that was interesting, where they told someone that he had a degenerative illness that was going to create phantom pain in his arm, and the guy was supposed to report on the amount of pain he felt, and he reported raising amounts of pain to the point where he told them that he needed painkillers or he was just going to end himself, and yet nothing was happening, meaning that he could get his own brain to inflict such pain on him that he couldn't bear living with it anymore, and yet there was absolutely nothing. Keep that in mind with pain, because pain in reality creates pain. And a lot of the time, what forces you to not train is not an injury, it's the pain that is attached to it and associated with it. So, after the occurrence, the second levels I'm going to offer to you is the aftermath, what happens after the injury. Level 0 is soreness. Soreness also means absolutely nothing. You have to please make the distinction between a sore muscle and a broken muscle or a broken tendon. Level 1 is pain when lifting heavy. That could also be due to muscle soreness. Pain when lifting heavy is not a sign of injury. It could be a sign of poor technique. It could be a sign that there's something that is not essentially well oiled on that day, but it's not a sign that you should stop lifting altogether. What you can do on days where heavy lifting hurts is to just find a variation with a different angle or reduce the load for the day. You're not gonna die because you're not squatting heavy. One day you can squat with less weight and you will find that the pain will go away. And the pain going away is important because the more pain you feel, the more pain you're going to tell yourself you should feel, and it's going to get worse and worse. So get yourself out of that cycle as soon as possible. Level 2 is pain when lifting any amount of weight, okay? This is where there might be some damage, and yet it's not something that is going to take you out of the gym. You can just do a different movement, or again, find a different way to do the movement, modify the range of motion to continue moving, to not give in to the pain per se. Level 3 is pain when moving, period. Meaning that you don't even have to squat, just walking around hurts, for example. This usually means that there is an injury, although a lot of the time people who feel that have tendonitis. Tendonitis is extremely common with lifters because most of the time they have poor recovery. If you want a guide on how to deal with tendonitis, I can make one for you guys. I've had terrible, crippling tendonitis my entire lifting career, and right now I'm completely cured. It's actually very easy to take care of. So that's level 3, and that is when pain starts becoming an inconvenience in everyday life, and when it becomes a curse, because that's when you focus on it. You're going to feel it every day. It's going to become that beast on your shoulder, that demon that whispers in your ear all the time, that you're snapped up, and you're going to pay more and more attention to it, and it's going to get worse and worse. This is the level where you need to start paying attention to things. Level 4, pain to the touch. This doesn't work with bruises, please understand that. But for tendons and muscles, if you have severe pain to the touch, if you're not sore from an activity, this could mean that there is structural damage. So that's a good sign that there could be an injury. Level 5 is pain at rest, meaning that even when you don't move, you feel pain. Yeah, most of the time, this is either that you completely psyched yourself out and pain has made its nest into your brain, or you have actual damage done to the body. And the paroxysm of that is when pain wakes you up. When pain wakes you up, yeah, most of the time something happened. And level 6 is you can't move. I don't have to explain to you why. Of course, if you can't move, that means that structural damage has been done. Most people never even get close to that because, as I said, most people are skewed towards the very sensitive to pain type, and therefore they never get to that level because they stop way beforehand. This also means, by the way, that, again, I reiterate because I don't want people getting hurt because they don't understand basic English. I am not saying to not listen to pain. I am saying to interpret the pain using the levels I gave you. And as you can see, out of 6 levels, in reality, there are only 3, 4, or 5 that show anything severe happened. The other 6, 7 show that you are completely fine. And that if you apply the strategy that I told you, you're going to be okay. It's most likely nothing major. You're going to be fine. You're not going to be fine, however, if you, again, go completely psycho and think that it's the end of the world and you killed yourself. Your body is not made of sugar. And it's really good at telling you, hey, this is something that is actually major, but at the same time, it's also good at telling you that, hey, look at this and look at this and look at this. And the more you listen to the body when it pricks you, the more it's going to stab you because you are showing it responses. The best thing you can do to your body is to ignore the small pains, to push them aside, to assess them properly, so that when something actually severe occurs, you're going to be able to tell, okay, this is this. Your body is the boy that cried wolf. Your job is to not believe it too much and just to keep an eye on things. Of course, if a pain evolves, as I explained, and it starts going up the levels, that is a problem that you need to pay attention to. And that is it for this guide and for the actual numerical values applied to the quantification of pain. This is part 1. Actually, I'm preparing a part 2 where I'm going to tell you what to do afterwards. Because if now you know whether or not you just got snapped up, and the answer is still yes, what then? Well, I have a guide for that too that is going to help you recover, help you manage the psychology of injuries, how to make sure that your mindset is right so that you can come back stronger and better than before. Every time I make these types of video and I talk about injuries and everything in reality, I like to systemize it because I have found that it removes emotion from the equation, which allows people to actually be in control. What comes next is going to depend, as I said, but I want you to think about one thing, regardless of if you got injured or not, regardless of if you have the ability to decipher between something severe or something that is just benign. I want you to put function over sensation always. Pain shows that the body's integrity is in danger. But if the body's integrity is proven to be intact via function, then the sensation is null and non-important. Repeat that to yourself. It's very, very key because it combats fear. Pain creates fear, and the more fear of pain you have, the more pain you feel, because avoiding pain is impossible. Pain is just a normal variable of life. It is up to you to decide if it's just something that is inflicted upon you or something you're going to receive and use as a metric to avoid it in the future. Not so that you cannot feel pain, but that you can continue moving and using your body and growing. And that is what I'm going to end this video on. Any question you might have, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching and have a good day.